Hi, this is Rabbi Yitzchak Blau, one of the Rosh Yeshiva at Yeshivat Orayta. And I'd like to thank Rabbi Michael Leitner for setting up this opportunity to share some Torah with you. Okay, as you probably know, the Gemara we have is divided into halachic sections dealing with Jewish law and aggadic sections that include stories and ethical maxims and even medical advice. And traditionally in Yeshiva, there's been more of a focus on the halachic sections. We are, after all, a rather law-centered religion. But Chazal put the aggadic sections there for a reason. They're clearly significant. And Chazal were really working off the model of Chumash. Right? If we think about Chumash, Chumash is a guide to religious life that integrates law and narrative. Right? Breshit is almost all narrative. Vayikra is almost all law. And Shmot and Bamidbar, mixtures of different kinds. So apparently the ideal religious guide really needs both. There's certain things we get from the structure of halacha and other things we get from the inspiration of Aggada. So one of my educational goals in life is to put Aggada a bit more on the map of the world of Yeshivot. I actually wrote a book about it. And we're going to look at an aggadic section today that I think touches on issues relating to Sukkot. Now, it's going to be a little bit unusual because the story I'm going to analyze is usually taught more on Lag BaOmer. Okay, but we're going to see that it has a Sukkot theme and a Shabbat theme. And from that perspective, I think it does work for this time of year. Okay, so we're going to go back to the story of Shimon bar Yochai in the cave. It appears on Shabbat, Daf Lamed Gimel Amud Bet. It's a bit of an extended tale. So I'll ask you to bear with me while I go through the story. And then we will analyze what's going on in this story. Okay, so the story starts with the following, that Rabbi Yehuda, one of the most important Tanaim, got a nickname. He is referred to as Rosh HaMedabrim B'chol Makom, the chief speaker in every occasion. Rabbi Yehuda, he's the keynote speaker. And after the Gemara refers to Rabbi Yehuda that way, it wants to know how he got that nickname. How did Rabbi Yehuda get that title or that privilege of being Rosh HaMedabrim B'chol Makom? So the Gemara says that it's based on the following story, that three rabbis were sitting around with a fourth fellow named Yehuda ben Gerim, and they were discussing the Romans, and they had different evaluations of how to think about the Roman Empire. So Rabbi Yehuda was pretty praiseworthy. Rabbi Yehuda says, those Romans, they brought civilization to us. They brought markets, they brought bathhouses, they brought bridges, right? The Romans were the power of the time, the most advanced technological nation. So when the Romans encountered the Jews, right, they brought civilization. So Rabbi Yehuda is positive. Okay, Rabbi Yossi is, as it were, the Switzerland of the rabbinic world. He doesn't take a stand. Rabbi Yossi remains quiet. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai is highly negative. And he says that if we really dig a bit more deeply, we'll see that the Romans are really coming from a more self-centered approach, that the bridges are a means of collecting taxes and the markets are a place for prostitutes. And he sees a darker underbelly to this technology. Okay, now, as we know in life, there aren't so many secrets. So this Yehuda ben Gerim tells the story, and it gets back to the Roman authorities. And apparently the Roman authorities were not very good at handling criticism. So before we get to the criticism, though, they were very happy that Rabbi Yehuda had praised them. So they say, Rabbi Yehuda, you get raised up, you get privileges. Now, it seems like this is the reason for the entire story. Remember, we wanted to figure out how Rabbi Yehuda became Rosh HaMedabrim B'chol Makom, the chief speaker. And now we seem to know the Romans gave him, you get special speaking privileges because you praised the Romans. Now, the Romans were so sensitive to their honor, they're not only angry with Rav Shimon bar Yochai, they're even angry with Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi, who's quiet, has to go into exile to Tzipori. Now, a good student of mine just asked, why do we need the Rabbi Yossi part of the story? But I think it is telling that apparently even neutrality was not good enough. Even neutrality caused some form of punishment, that they had to go to Tzipori. But Shimon bar Yochai, he gets a death sentence upon his head. Right, that obviously is much harsher. So here, Shimon bar Yochai and his son have to go into hiding. Now, there's a part of the story that's not so famous that I always found a bit humorous. The famous part, of course, is that he hides in a cave. But people don't know that before that, his original move is to hide in the Beit Midrash. He and his son go hide in the Beit Midrash. And I always found it a little bit humorous, like where else would you look for a Shimon bar Yochai? So unless it was some kind of reverse psychology, oh, the Romans will never suspect that I went to the Beit Midrash, it always seemed to me to be a bit of a funny hiding place. Okay, be that as it may, he soon leaves the Beit Midrash and goes to the cave. Again, if anyone wants to look this up, it is Shabbat Lamed Gimel Amud Bet. In the cave, a miracle happens, and a carob tree grows, and a stream of water emerges. Okay, so now they're good for food and drink. They've got the carob tree, right? A charuv in Hebrew. They've got the water. Okay, good. Now something very interesting also emerges. There's a whole question to what degree you could derive halacha from aggadic stories. Maybe stories are not meant to be halachically precise, but there's a very interesting halacha that seems to emerge here. It says they were nervous that they're going to be there an extended period of time, and their clothes might wither away. So they wanted to minimize the amount of time they wore clothes. So it says that all day they would remove their clothes, sit up to their neck in sand, and study Torah. And when it came time for tefillah, when it came time for davening, then they would get dressed. So it's interesting because it seems to show that there's a difference in clothing requirements for Talmud Torah and tefillah. Like Talmud Torah, as long as your private parts are covered, that's respectable enough to engage in good Torah study. Where tefillah, which has a sense of standing before the king, that apparently has a higher standard of dress, and then they would put on their clothes for tefillah. Okay, so they do this for a 12-year period. After 12 years, Eliyahu Hanavi comes by, and Eliyahu says, who will let Bar Yochai know that the Caesars died? And apparently the principle was that when the Caesar died, there was a commutation of they commuted the death sentences that were left hanging. So now there's an annulment of the death sentence of Shimon bar Yochai and his son. So they could come back. So they come back to civilization, and they see people planting and plowing, and they're furious. Don't forget, what have they been doing for 12 years? All they've been doing is studying Torah and davening. They are living a purely spiritual existence, and they see people engaged in the mundane, and they are quite furious that people are engaged in the mundane. And they say, it can't be, and everywhere they look gets burnt. They burn up the world, as it were. And a heavenly voice comes out of Bat Kol and says, you came out of the cave to destroy my world, get back in the cave. Okay, so again, they were there for the first period of time for 12 years. Now they're back in the cave. And this time, they're there, the Gemara says, for Tresar Yarche Shata, 12 months of the year. So it's interesting that instead of saying a year, it says 12 months. That is the number 12 again. And it even makes a comment that the Rishayim, the wicked, are punished in Gehenom for 12 months. So this seems to be some punishment akin to Gehenom. And then the Bakol says they could come out again. Okay, so they come out a second time. Again, the first duration was 12 years. The second duration was 12 months. And now there's a gap between father and son. The son still looks angrily upon the world. And when he looks on the world, he strikes things. And the father heals them. Okay, so it might make a lot of sense. You know, have the young firebrand, young people a bit more hot-headed. The older tend to be a bit calmer, a bit more moderate. So maybe there's now a split between the younger generation and the older. And Rosh Hashanah says to his son, don't worry, if you and I are in this world, that's enough. You don't have to be so angry. But then they see, and here comes, I think, the crucial part of the story. They see an older Jew running just before Shabbat. And he's holding two hadas branches, two myrtle branches. And they say to this older Jew, why are you holding these branches? And he answers, L'chvot Shabbat, right? A nice smell for the Shabbos. That's what I'm doing it. I'm honoring the Shabbos. And then they say to him, but why do you have two? Wouldn't one suffice? And he says, no, one is representing the Zachar aspect of Shabbat. One is representing Shamar, right? Shabbat has a positive commandment. We make Kiddush and do, Oneg and Kavod. And there's also a Shmirat Shabbat, a negative, a prohibition aspect that we refrain from Malacha. So that's why I have two hottest branches. Shimon bar Yochai turns to his son and says, see, Kama Chaviv and Mitzvot Al Yisrael. How much the Jews love mitzvot. Okay, that's the story. Now, before we analyze it, maybe we'll think a little bit about Talmudic methodology. Like when you have a story, every story has a bunch of details. And you could always ask, are those details full of symbolic significance? Are they pregnant with meaning? Or are they just details, meaning if there be no details, there's no story, right? You can't just say, a man went to the market and came home, right? You need details. So it's always tricky when the details are full of significance, when they're not. And it's hard to say that there's an exact science to figure out when they have symbolic meaning. But I'm going to make a couple of suggestions in a particular direction, right? Some rough guidelines that might help us, and then we'll apply it over here. So one rough guideline would be, is the detail superfluous? Did we really need to know it? Just give an example. Let's say in Tanakh. In Tanakh, we normally don't hear about the physical characteristics of our heroes, right? Were they tall or short? Were they fat or thin? Were they brunettes, blondes, or redheads? We usually tend to not find that out. So when we're told that, I think we should take notice. Either it's affecting the plot, or it really has symbolic significance, right? So it may be a superfluous detail. We should take note. I think also a very unusual detail would make us take note, right? Let's say, getting back to Tanakh again, let's say there are only 2 redheads in all of Tanakh, only 2 people described as Admoni, only David and Esav. So I think we'd start to wonder, is there some kind of connection, some kind of commonality or opposition being drawn between Esav and David? Okay, so we've got, number one, a superfluous detail, and we've got an unusual detail. Thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, what about a detail with resonance? Every tradition has stories that really matter, and every tradition has symbols. So do we see the choice of detail as picking up on that symbol? I'll give you the simplest example. Okay, let's say there's a Talmudic story where there's a snake in a garden. It is hard for a Jew of any knowledge to read that story and not think about Adam and Chava and Gan Eden, right? Snakes in gardens create an immediate association. So I think the last thing I would ask is there some association in our tradition, a biblical association, a rabbinic association, something why, the item chosen should make me think a certain way. Just to give you 2 Talmudic examples, and then we'll finally bring this back to our Gemara. Okay, there's a famous Gemara in Menachot Mem Daled about a man interacting with a prostitute. Very, very interesting Gemara where he refrains in the end. Really worth its own analysis. You can look in my book if you'd like. And in the story, she charges 400 gold coins. Now, I admit it's gold, so it's not exact parallel, but it's hard for a Jew who knows his Tanakh to hear 400 coins and not think of a story, right? Where is the story where someone pays 400 coins? That's, of course, what Avram pays for the burial plot of Sarah. So if lurking in that story has to do some theme of male-female interaction, what's the right kind of interaction that halacha wants, what's a more problematic interaction, maybe it's not an accident if there's an allusion to Avram's dedication to his wife. Avram's dedication to his wife, Sarah, that would be one example of such an allusion. Just one more. There's a Gemara in Yoma Daf Lamed Chet, where a man named Nakdimon is trying to bring golden gates to the Beit HaMikdash, and he's bringing them by boat. Unfortunately, things are stormy, and when things are stormy, to save the boat, you have to throw things overboard. And they throw, the boat, the golden gate overboard, and yet it makes it at the end of the day to the shore. Now, again, if you are a Jew who knows his Tanakh, and there's a story about a storm on a boat where you have to throw something overboard, it is extremely difficult not to have associations with Sefer Yonah. So I think someone who's learning Yoma Lamed Chet would have to ask himself or herself, what is the Yonah tie-in? What is the Yonah parallel? Okay, so I think we've got a little bit of a good method here, how to go about this issue. Okay, now to get things really exciting. What about our Gemara? So what could we look at? So I'm just going to point out some things, some directions we could go, but I'm not going to get into it. You might wonder about names. Names can have symbolic significance. So, sorry, I can't resist one example. For example, Hevel is called Hevel, but we don't know why. But think about the fact that his life is very fleeting. Unfortunately, Cain kills him in his young age. One might think that's why his name is Hevel, right? He is someone whose life is vain and fleeting. It is not enduring. So names could be full of significance, right? If you like Harry Potter, you might know that, right? Why is there a character called Dolores Umbridge? Because Dolores in Spanish has to do with pain and suffering. It is not an accident that's her name. Okay, so in our story, you might wonder, probably wouldn't wonder so much about Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, but the fourth fellow, the one who spills the beans, Yehuda ben Gerim, that's kind of an intriguing name. What does ben Gerim have to do with it? So I'm not going to delve into it. I just want to raise it as a possible thought. Okay, so we can look at names. We could look at numbers. Numbers are often interesting. We discussed 400 before. And in our Gemara, we had 2 12s. They're in the cave for 12 years, and then they're in the cave for 12 months. And I think it's particularly striking because we could have just defined 12 months as a year. And we go out of our way to say 12 months makes it sound that we really like the number 12. So the next thing we could do would be ask, where's 12 a symbol in our tradition? Okay, but we're going to put both those aside and deal with 3 items, 3 objects that appear. And here I think we'll get a very powerful message. What do we have? The food is a carob tree. Now, a carob tree could, in theory, be anything else. An apple tree would work just as well, a pear tree, right? All they need is food. Now, you might say, okay, it has to be something. But what if we notice that carob trees keep coming up again and again in famous Talmudic stories? In the famous story of Tanur Shel Achinai, when Rabbi Eliezer tries to bring miraculous proofs that he's halachically correct, it is a carob tree that gets uprooted. In the story of Choni HaMa'agel, when Choni does not understand why someone is planting a tree that bears fruit only many years later, and Choni ultimately goes to sleep for 70 years, the fruit tree in question is once again a carob tree. Now here again, we're trying to figure out, does this symbol have resonance in our tradition? It's hard to imagine it's an accident that carob trees came up in 3 different stories. Shimon in the cave, Choni HaMa'agel in sleeping 70 years, and the miraculous proofs of Rabbi Eliezer. Okay, let's leave that aside. Caves certainly have resonance in our tradition. I'd ask you now, I'll come back in a few minutes, who goes in a cave in Tanakh? And finally, Hadassim. Again, he could have been running with anything before Shabbos to honor Shabbat. Is there something about Hadassim in particular? Now, let's think about the theme of the story, and then I think we'll be able to do some very beautiful things with these items. Now, if I ask you what the main theme of the story seems to be, so it seems to be that these Talmidei Chachamim need to learn how to make their peace with the world. Meaning they've been doing something very pristine, very beautiful. They've spent more than a decade in a cave. All they do is study Torah and daven to Hashem. But they come to a mistaken conception in which the only worthwhile endeavor, the only way to spend one's time is in the realm of the spiritual. As if anybody who is, planting and plowing his field to earn a living is somehow engaged in problematic behavior. And indeed, when they come out of the cave and they're burning things up, the heavenly voice is not happy. The heavenly voice says, did you come to destroy my world? Get back in the cave. So the Gemara itself has a pretty clear criticism of this rabbinic approach. And it even uses the phrase of Mishpat Risha'im B'Gehenom is 12 months, right? That's the time that the wicked are judged in Gehenom. Then when is the story, we have the turning point? So when they see the Jew running for Shabbat, what do they notice? This common Jew who I was looking down on for being a farmer, he's got a spiritual side too. Notice he really loves Shabbos. He comes and honors it with these beautiful spelled myrtle branches. So at that point, I really shouldn't be so negative to him. So let's say that the real theme of the story is people who are, yeshiva guys, as it were, or rabbis who are spiritually charged, learning to respect and perhaps even admire a more basic, a more common Jew who's yet committed to the tradition. Okay, great. Now comes the really brilliant part. How about Hadas branches? What symbolism do Hadas branches have in our tradition? So the first thing, of course, you all think of is Sukkot. We have Hadas branches are one of the 4 minim. Okay, but let's push things a bit further. What are their symbolism? What do they symbolize in the world of Sukkot? So here I want to give credit to a very fine fellow named Professor Jeffrey Rubenstein. He's a professor of Talmud at NYU. He's written some very nice books of aggadic literature. I highly recommend them. This is from a book he wrote called Talmudic Stories. So let's think about the Midrashim. So you probably know 2 famous Midrashim about the Arba Minim. In one of them, it's 4 parts of the body, right? The spine, the eyes, the mouth, etc. In the other Midrash, they represent 4 kinds of Jews. Who do they represent? Let's go through it one by one, and then I think the pshat will be very powerful. The etrog has a good taste and good smell. Those are the Jews who have Torah and Masim Tovim. The Aravot have neither taste nor smell. They're the Jews lacking both. The etrog has taste but not smell. Those are the Jews with Torah and without Masim Tovim. Sorry, not the etrog. I meant to say the lulav. The lulav, meaning the fruit of the lulav, the date palm has taste and not smell. They have Torah and not Masim Tovim. And the Hadassim have smell and no taste. They have Masim Tovim and lack Torah scholarship. So Professor Rubenstein points out quite brilliantly, that's the perfect symbol for this Jew. What do we have here? Two major Talmudic Chachamim, Shimon bar Yochai and his son Rabbi Lezer, and they lack respect initially after those years in the cave, after that dozen of years in the cave, for the Jews who are plowing and planting. But what do they see when they see such a Jew running with the myrtle branches? They see that, in fact, no, you should respect this Jew. Even Jews who might not be so erudite, who don't know the Ksod HaChoshen or Masechet Baba Batra or the Kuzari, they could be wonderful people. They could be religious paradigms, right? Here's this fellow who loves Shabbat. He might be a wonderful Jew. Maybe he does great things for the community. So he, as it were, is not just holding the Hadas branch. He is represented by the Hadas branch, right? The Jew without Torah who has Masim Tovim. I would also like to suggest that Shabbat fits this theme, because often the Jew works hard all week. You might think he has no spiritual side. When will you see his spiritual side? When will it emerge? On Shabbat. That's when he has time to daven with a slow pace. That's when he has time to go to a shiur. That's when he has time to have a beautiful conversation with his family, right? So now you might say Shabbat fits well also. Hadas is about those kind of Jews. Shabbat is when they're able to manifest their spirituality. I will go one step further. It could be the Gemara kind of was a bit misleading about why this story appears where it does. This story appears in the second parak of Shabbat, Bamem Madlikim. That's the parak about getting ready for Shabbat just before Shabbat. So the story certainly fits. We have this elderly Jew running to prepare for Shabbat just before Shabbat. So even though it seems like this story only appeared in its location due to an association, a desire to explain why Rabbi Yehuda is Rosh HaMedabrim B'chol Makom, maybe there's a much deeper level at work here in that it belongs in a parak about preparing for Shabbat. There's a Shabbat theme lurking in the story. Okay, let's go back to the cave. Who hides in the cave in Tanakh? So one of the people who hides in the cave is Eliyahu Hanavi. Now, if you think I'm stretching it by trying to bring Eliyahu Hanavi in the story, recall the following. Eliyahu appears in the story. Right? Remember, the second time it's a bat kol that calls them from the cave, but the first time it's Eliyahu Hanavi that calls them from the cave. So you have explicit mention of Eliyahu, and you have a cave, and doesn't Eliyahu fit the story so beautifully? Right? What is Eliyahu's drawback in his prophetic mission in Sefer Melachim? That Eliyahu is too harsh on the people. Right? He does not understand divine mercy. He wants God to punish them with an iron hand. So at that point, right, Eliyahu would also fit the story. Right? Is it our Rav Shimon bar Yochai's son going to get stuck in Eliyahu mode? And if you're stuck in Eliyahu mode, you can't really interact with the people. And notice, Eliyahu, in a certain sense, if you read Sefer Melachim, gets fired. Right? At some point, Hashem basically says to him, you have to move on. And we're going to move on to the main prophet. It's going to be your young charge, Elisha. Right? Because you really are just too negative, right? Too critical of the people. So I think if you put that all together, you have this brilliant usage of imagery and associations to try to create the theme of the story, right? The theme is about the rabbis who are too critical, right? Can't make their peace with the people. And we have the Hadas branch, which represents those Jews who really should be respected, even if they're not such Torah scholars. They have Masim Tovim. We have Eliyahu in the cave imagery of this extra zealousness towards the people. And all that adds to the power of the story. Okay, in terms of the carob tree, I admit I can't really make the carob tree fit into that theme. So I'll just mention the Marsha of Shmuel Edels, who is perhaps the most famous commentary in Aggada. Okay, one of the things you'll discover when you learn the aggadic sections is there isn't as much commentary, because a lot of the most famous Mefarshim kind of skip the aggadic sections. One great example actually is Tosfot. If you ever look at a Vilna Shas, you'll discover there are more words on aggadic page than halachic page, for a very simple reason, because Tosfot's not commenting in the aggadic page. So if Tosfot's not taking up space, there are more words of Aggada, more words of Gemara, where in halachic page, Tosfot has a lot to say, and then there's less space for Talmudic words. But be that as it may, there were always exceptional commentaries who did do beautiful work on the Aggada. The Marsha is one of them. So the Marsha would like to say, well, what do I know about the carob tree from the Choni HaMagel story? that it's very, very slowly developing, right? Choni is in shock. Why would someone plant something that requires 70 years to bear fruit? Okay, that story also is a beautiful story that demands analysis. I apologize, it's a bit like, self-aggrandizing, but that's also discussed in my book, okay, which is called Fresh Fruit and Vintage Wine, The Ethics and Wisdom of the Aggada. But leave that aside, but he wants to plug that in over here. And here he simply says it's enhancing the miraculous quality of the Shimon bar Yochai existence. They go to the cave. In theory, they have no source of food and water. A stream of water emerges and a carob tree grows. So if any tree grew, it would be somewhat miraculous. But if you have a tree that tends to take many decades to bear good fruit and it's ready for consumption overnight, so that adds to miraculous quality. So I admit it's a little bit of a separate theme. That would not be, I think, the main theme of the story. This theme of scholars learning to reconcile themselves with the other Jews, not being so critical, being understanding, giving them the benefit of the doubt, seeing their value. But this is a separate theme about the miraculous. But I think we have enough symbols pointing to that theme, namely the Elio theme, the cave and Elio appearing, and the Hadas theme, and it's really explicitly the Gemara, right? The Bakal saying, don't go destroy my world, and them reconciling themselves after they see the Jew running with the Hadas branches. So we've got this Hadas theme that fits Sukkot, and we've got a Shabbos theme. That Shabbos is really a time that the working class Jew has a chance to really show his spiritual side. And I think many of them do so, something we should really respect. Okay, so we're going to wrap it up here. It was really a pleasure learning with you. I just hope I've inspired some of you to investigate the aggadic sections of Shas more deeply. Okay, there's really very beautiful stuff there, full of insight and inspiration. And we've seen a little bit some of the questions one might go about asking. One might ask, are the names of symbolic significance? Are the numbers of symbolic significance? Are the details and objects of the story of symbolic significance? And finally, even is the placement of the story meaningful? And here we wanted to say, even when it seems like we have a technical reason for the placement, it seems like it's only here to explain Rabbi Yehuda is Rosh HaMedabrim B'chol Makom. It turns out there might be a much deeper reason, that this is about the moment just before Shabbat. That's the key moment of the story. So where else is a more appropriate place to put it than the second parak of Shabbat, B'mem Aliken, which we recite on Friday nights, about preparing for Shabbat. So please God, all of you who are listening, you should have a good year. The world, should get healthier, which should be a Chag Sameach and a Gemar Chatima Tova. And we should all have a year where we enjoy Talmud Torah, and maybe this year in particular, the Talmud Torah, the beautiful insight and the profound meaning that can be found in the aggadic sections of Shas. Everybody should be well.